So if you're paying attention while you're driving around Hastings, especially with springtime coming, you're gonna see even more of these great signs advertising farm fresh eggs. So let's take these straight from the farm eggs back to my kitchen and see what we can make this month. We're gonna start off our Easter brunch with chocolate covered strawberry rolls. So it's kind of like cake, dessert, breakfast bread, all rolled into one. So the perfect thing to add to your brunch table. So what I have in here is 1 cup of milk that I've warmed up, and to that I added 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. Now this has been sitting together for the last 5 minutes, and I'm gonna start by putting this in my mixing bowl. Now here's the thing, if you don't work a lot with yeast, you have to be careful when you heat up that milk because you don't want it too hot. So to that, I'm going to add the rest of my dough ingredients. So I'm gonna take 2 of our farm fresh eggs from one of our farms in Hastings, and I'm gonna add 2 eggs. To that, I'm gonna add my sugar. This is a 1/2 cup of sugar. This is 1 teaspoon of salt, and we have 1/3 cup of butter. In my mixer, I've got a dough hook, and that's going to do a lot of the kneading for me. So I'm gonna lock my mixer in, and I'm gonna start stirring this, and then to this, I'm going to add my flour. And I'm gonna add 4 cups of flour to my dough. And I wanna make sure I add it nice and slowly so I don't get a big poof. While this is mixing, I'm gonna go back over to that bowl that I had my flour in. And now that it's emptied, I'm gonna take just some cooking spray and I'm gonna cover this nicely. I'm gonna put my dough in here to let it rise, and I want my dough to about double. Okay, so now I have all of my dough combined, and now I'm gonna transfer my dough into my second bowl. And now all I need to do is cover it with a towel and put it in a warm spot in my kitchen, and we're gonna let this sit for 1 hour, and then we'll come back to it. We have our dough all wrapped up tight, so let's work on our chocolate covered strawberries for the inside. So I'm gonna start by taking some strawberries and cutting off the tops, obviously. And what I want is about 3 cups worth of strawberries. And I'm going to take them and cut them into little strips. Okay. And now I've got them sliced one direction, so I'll just, sorry, I thought of the band. Now that I've got them sliced one direction, now I'm going to dice them up yet again, make the pieces a little smaller, and I'm gonna move these into a bowl out of the way and keep working, like I said, until I have about 3 cups. So the other day, I was on YouTube, and I a lot of times will look for different kitchen gadget videos. And there was one that said the 10 most useless kitchen utensils that people waste their money on. And one of them was this strawberry slicer. And I use this strawberry slicer all of the time. So I don't know if they just hated it or they feel like you have to eat a lot of strawberries. I don't know, but I feel like I've definitely gotten my money's worth on that strawberry slicer. So now that I have 3 cups of strawberries, I want to get this nice and juicy for when I put it inside of my rolls. So I've got some secret ingredients back here. The first is a teaspoon of vanilla. The next is a teaspoon of cornstarch. And that cornstarch is going to pull some of the juice out of that fruit. And a 1/4 cup of sugar. And I'm just going to take my hands and toss that all together so that it gets nice and lightly coated. And now we're just gonna let that sit while I start to roll out my dough. So I'm going to take and put some flour onto my table. And now I'm gonna plop out, oh, I was hoping it'd plop on its own. I'm gonna plop out my dough. And it's gonna be a little tacky from resting. And now I'm gonna sprinkle some dough on the top. And now what I wanna do is roll out my dough so that it's about 10 inches by 12 inches. And I want it to be about 1/4 inch thick. You get this nice big honker. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my strawberries, I'm gonna sprinkle it all over the top of my dough. And now that we have our strawberries all rolled around, we're gonna come in with dark chocolate chips and we're gonna sprinkle that in there, because when this goes into the oven, what's going to happen is that chocolate's going to melt, and that's how we're gonna get our chocolate covered strawberries. What I like to do is make my edges nice and even. And this dough makes a little extra, so I like to cut off those extra pieces. And now I'm going to start by folding it over the edge, just like this. And I'm going to slowly tuck and roll. And I want to push out any air so that every inch gets filled in. And now I have the start of my rolls. So I have a parchment lined baking sheet right here. So all I'm going to do is cut about 1.5 inch spiral through my dough. And actually 1.5 to 2 inches. They don't have to be perfect. And I'm going to scoop it up and I'm going to put them into my pan. With this recipe, you could really put in any fruit that you want. I saw a recipe similar to this, but it had raspberries in it, and for the life of me, I cannot stand raspberries. I don't know why. If it's like raspberry and candy, that's fine, but as soon as I get those little seeds, I don't know, something happened in my life where now I don't like them. I used to eat them, but for whatever reason, now I don't like them. Put a towel over the top. I'm gonna let it sit for another half an hour, and then they'll be nice and boop, and then we'll be ready to put them in the oven. We let the dough rise for half an hour, then we put it in a 350-degree oven for half an hour, and now we have beautifully baked chocolate covered strawberry rolls. But I think we need a little bit of glaze on the top. So in here I have a half a cup or so of a chocolate hazelnut spread, and then about a handful of dark chocolate chips, and I just put them in the microwave to melt it up, and now we are simply going to start our drizzling. So what I like to do is just keep going back and forth one way. All right, so I've got my swipes going one way, so now I'll go the other way. And then you can let it sit and harden up if you want to, or you can pull it out for an ooey gooey delicious bite. So we need a nice hearty main dish for our brunch. So we're going to make a bacon egg brunch ring. It's a fun kind of twist on an egg bake that so many people have when it comes to Easter time. So I'm going to start with the bacon. I have 4 slices of bacon, but what I've done is I've actually cut them in half. And I'm going to lay them in my pan, and I'm going to put my burner on medium, and I'm going to start cooking them. I don't want to cook them all the way though, I just want to cook them halfway, because this is going to start cooking here and it's going to finish cooking in the oven. So I'm going to lay those all over my pan, and then while my bacon's cooking, what I'm going to do is start making my egg mixture. So what I have here is I have a 2-cup mixing cup, and in that I have 1/3 cup of milk. I'm going to start by adding 4 eggs to it. So I have 1 farm fresh egg, I have 2 farm fresh eggs, 3 farm fresh eggs, and I have 4 farm fresh eggs. Now I'm going to take just a fork and I'm going to pop my yolks, and I'm going to work on combining them. And now what I've got going here is a nice egg mixture. And when I start to get some steam coming off my bacon, I'm going to flip my pieces. And now I'm going to hop back over to my eggs, and I've added some salt and pepper. And now I'm going to stir to combine all of that. And really with salt and pepper here, it's just to taste. Some people like more salt, some people like more pepper. Also, if you've got a thing where everybody's a little picky about their salt and pepper, you can totally leave it out and just have it on your table, and people can doctor it up however they'd like. So looking at my bacon, it looks pretty close. I'm going to check on it a little more. Like I said, I want it to be cooked through but not done. So while my bacon's finishing, I'm going to grab a red pepper And I'm gonna add that to my eggs. And I need about 1/4 cup of a red pepper. And so I'm gonna dice that up nice and fine. And to make sure that there's not a hidden surprise in there, I like to take all the seeds out. I don't want to surprise somebody with a little more spice than they were expecting. Not that red peppers are very spicy, but it does make a little difference. So I'm going to start by slicing, and then I'm going to dice them. One thing that's nice about this brunch ring is you can doctor up your eggs however you'd like. If you are more of a sausage in your scrambled eggs type family, you could definitely switch out the bacon for sausage, but we are definitely a bacon family. Growing up, there was bacon at every breakfast. My dad's job was always to make the bacon. So while we had our cereal, we waited for our bacon, and then the bacon would dangle precariously on the edge of the cereal bowl when it was cooked. So now I have 1/4 cup of red pepper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that to my egg mixture, and I'm going to stir this up. So now I'm actually going to use some of those delicious flavors from that bacon pan. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the bacon out of the pan and put it back on a clean plate. And I'm going to cook my eggs in that pan that I cooked my bacon in. That way I get the flavor of that bacon inside of all of my scrambled eggs. And I'm going to pour my eggs into my pan. Now I don't want them to be a hard scramble. I want them to stay a soft scrambled egg. So what I'm going to do is put it back on medium. I'm going to let it start cooking, and when the eggs start to set up, then I'm going to take my rubber scraper and I'm going to start combining them. So I'm going to let them sit for just a moment. And now I'm going to get started on my ring of my brunch ring. So we have my arch nemesis, the tube of biscuits that I have to open without frightening myself too drastically. Okay. Okay, so they are opened. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up that roll and find my first triangle. And I'm going to lay it on my pan. Now it's totally fine if it flops over the edge, because what we're going to do is make them into a circle, and we're eventually going to fold the pieces on top of one another. And there are 8 pieces, so plan accordingly. And our eggs are starting to cook. So we're going to come in and we're going to scramble these up a smidgen. Alrighty, that looks perfect. So we're going to turn that off. And now we're going to start transferring our scrambled eggs. And I like to go through and break up the pieces a little bit more. So now I'm just going to take and slide my pan over. And what I'm going to do is start compiling a small ring of eggs around my brunch ring. You can use a spoon or a scraper, either is fine. I like to start by making one ring around the middle so that I have a nice smooth circle, and then I go back around and I'll add more to it. Okay, so now we have all of our eggs spread in a circle, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some cheese to this. So I have 1 cup of shredded cheese here. Now what I have is it's a Mexican blend of cheese because I like a little bit of kick in my eggs, but you could go with shredded cheddar, you could go with whatever really your heart desires. So what I like to do is start by putting a little bit on the outside of each triangle, and then I have just a smidgen left, and I like to just quickly brush around the inside just so I get a little cheese bite in there. And then if you remember, we have that bacon that we cooked earlier. So now I have my pieces, so what I'm going to do is just lay them around the circle on top of the exposed part of the eggs. I'm just going to keep working around the circle. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the outside pieces of my triangles and I'm going to tuck them in just like this. And when I wrap this around, you're gonna see that there's pieces of bacon and bits of cheese popping out. That's totally fine because remember, it expands when you put it in the oven. So I'm gonna fold this over the top and bring in my last piece. And I've got some extra dough in there, so what I'm gonna do is just push it together with my fingers. And then the very last thing I do so this cooks up nice and golden brown in the oven is I just have regular old milk in here. There's nothing fancy with it, and I'm just going to brush the top of my dough with that milk, and then all it really needs is 25-30 minutes in the oven to turn golden brown. I'm gonna pop it in an oven that I already have preheated to 350 degrees. And then our brunch ring is all done and ready to eat. These lemon pie bars are fantastic for family get-togethers. A lot of times when you think of pie, you think of Thanksgiving, but this takes the flavors of pie and makes them into an easy bar that people can grab off of any brunch buffet. So let's get started. I have my pan ready right now. It's an 8x8 pan. You could make the recipe larger, but this is perfect for the amount of people coming to my brunch. And what I've done is I've lined it with parchment paper so that it'll be easier when it comes to cleaning up at the end. So now I'm going to start with my pie crust. So to do that, I'm going to take 1.5 cups of flour. I'm going to take a 1/2 cup of sugar, and I'm going to take 1/4 cup of butter. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine that all together with a pastry blender. If you don't have a pastry blender and it has all of these little tines in here to help combine your ingredients, you can simply do this with a fork, but I like mixing mine with a pastry blender. And so basically I'm just going to keep cutting through and combining all of my ingredients together. The only thing really bringing this together this time is the butter. So it's going to take a little bit of patience. It's going to come together nicely. So when you have all of your ingredients mixed together, you'll see that you have this crumbly concoction. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pour it into our pan, and then we're simply going to use our fingers and press it into a layer on the bottom of our pan, making our crust. And we're going to work to make sure that we get it pretty even throughout the whole bottom, and we want it packed nice and tightly. If you don't have it nice and tight, what might happen is our pie filling or our lemon flavoring are going to end up seeping into that crust. We are going to do some baking before we add that flavoring in the middle, but we don't want to run any of those risks, so we're going to pack it nice and tight. And there we go. We've got our nice packed crust. We're going to pop this into a 350-degree oven for 15 to 20 minutes, and then when we take it out, we're ready to add our filling. So let's mix that together. So while our crust is baking in the oven, let's get started on our filling. Now, we haven't really talked about this with farm fresh eggs, but if you look, they come in all different kinds of shapes and sizes and colors. You're gonna find that sometimes your eggs do not all look identical, and that lets you know that these are farm fresh eggs. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start by adding 4 whole eggs into my pan. Come on. Come on. Sometimes too, your eggs will have a thicker shell, or sometimes they'll have a thinner shell. It all depends on those chickens and how old they are. Usually a thicker shell means that the chicken is younger, and a thinner shell means that that chicken is older. So we've got 2, now we've got 3, and let's grab that big one, and 4. Now, what I'm going to add is just 2 of my egg yolks. I'm going to divide that white from the yolk. 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 And this is when your hand gets super goopy. So as soon as I'm done separating these, I'm going to make sure that I wash my hands. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to break apart my yolks just with my whisk. And I'm going to combine these all together. And it almost looks like I'm making scrambled eggs again, but I'm not. I'm getting this ready because now to this, I'm going to add sugar. I'm going to whisk to combine all of this. And I'm going to add some salt. And this is going to start being the base of our filling. But remember, these are lemon pie bars. So we need to do something to this to make it lemon. And we're going to do that by adding fresh lemon juice to it. So let's get that going, but I want to save some of this great outside of the lemon, and I'm going to do that by zesting away the colored part. I don't want to get into that white because that's going to make it bitter, and I want to hopefully, it smells like a lemon now, I want to hopefully get a few teaspoons of this from the outsides of my lemon. I remember when I was little, I thought this was totally disgusting that people would eat the outside of a lemon or an orange whenever there was zest in a recipe. Ugh. But no, actually it does a lot of really good things for your recipe. So I don't want to miss out on any of that flavor. So I'm going to actually just use this bowl that I had my sugar in to store my lemon zest. So I have my lemon zest sitting in my bowl over here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut open my lemons. So remember, we've done this before. We're going to grab our lemon and just roll it gently on the table because that's going to break apart some of the membranes in the lemon. And now I'm going to squeeze it over my pan. So now that I have all of that combined here, I'm just going to stir it a little bit and we're going to heat it up. And it's going to take 5 or so minutes, and we want it to start getting the consistency of like a pudding. So we've got a nice pudding consistency, so I'm going to take it off of the heat, and now to that I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of butter and all of that delicious lemon zest that I took off of my lemons before I juiced them. And I'm just going to stir to combine all this together off of my heat. And I'll know that it's nice and combined when I don't see any more chunks of butter in there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my crust that came out of the oven. And all I need to do is take and pour this over the top. And now what I'm going to do is just pick it up and shift it by hand into all of my corners. Now, if you've never made a lemon dessert before, one thing you need to keep in mind is we're going to put it in that 350-degree oven and it's going to be 15 to 20 minutes. But the tricky thing is, if you've never worked with lemon before, you don't want the top to turn brown. You want it to stay yellow, so it'll almost feel like it maybe isn't done. So just watch it, be patient, and just when you think it's going to turn brown, we're going to pull it out of the oven. So let's take a look at this Easter spread made from our delicious farm fresh eggs from right here in Hastings. So I'm going to start off with a chocolate covered strawberry roll. It's going to be delicious, it's going to be sweet, it's going to be savory and fantastic. Then I'm going to take a big slice out of my bacon and egg brunch ring, and I'm going to finish off with a lemon pie bar. With all this fantastic food, I'm sure to have a happy Easter. So remember, the apron's optional, but the flavor isn't.